Hey everyone, you know what time it is? It's time to rise and shine! Okay, back to the drawing board for that one. When you see this, you know things are about to go down. The Ultraman Rise sequence, as we now commonly call it, is the signature visual to show the arrival of an Ultraman. Every Ultraman has one of these. The visuals, the sound effects, the pose, all of these things make up each Ultraman's rise sequence and are an important part of their identity. For example, bold red background, it's Ultraman. Blue spacey background, Ultraman Leo. Cross arm pose which opens to the fist in the sky pose, Ultraman X. But what does the rise show in episode? Well, like was previously mentioned, its most important purpose is to show that the Ultraman has arrived. It provides a simple yet flashy sequence to indicate the hero's entrance to the viewer, sort of like a "yes, the hero's here" moment. And the other purpose it serves is to show that the Ultraman has changed in size. You see, if you didn't already know, Ultraman are giants. No. So back in 1966, how can a TV series, without spending too much time or budget, show that this character can grow to a giant size? Salt? The answer is to use perspective trickery by making the character zoom into the camera, making him look like he grew from being tiny to larger than the camera. And the end result is it looks like the Ultraman is rising from the ground to fight among the skyline. It's simple but effective. And how do you do the opposite? Yeah, that's what I thought. Filming these sequences isn't as straightforward as you'd expect though. They had to use a special kind of prop that blows up the size of the character's hand proportionate to what would look good as a rise. Hence these funny looking props with big hands that you sometimes see from production. Try doing it with any normal figure and you wouldn't get the same effect. Trust me, I tried. Like the title cards, these rises are an important part of the series' history and its overall imagery. And more importantly, almost all Ultras have rises. But alas, we won't be rating each Ultraman's rises because there's just so many of them and not enough screwdrivers to go around. Instead, we'll be taking a look at how these rises have evolved throughout the generations. Of course, the first ever rise is Ultraman's rise, minimalistic with a plain red background and flashing lights. The red background is quite similar to the title card in the opening theme. I'm not sure if that's intentional. His pose is kinda funny though, I wasn't sure what I was looking at when I was younger. I thought his knee was his color timer, and he was the only one who wasn't looking up among the Showa era Ultraman. He rises in a 3-stage enlargement effect, which continued to be utilized by a lot of subsequent Ultraman like Leo, AT, and Taro, and even recent Ultraman like Ginga and Victory. The template set by Ultraman has largely been emulated by others following him, but with different flares like colorful backgrounds or different poses, and in Ultraman Ace's case, a spinning entrance. Ultraman Taro has a pose which is quite strikingly different though, with his palm being open instead of the usual closed fist. But of course, all of these still remain familiar as a sequence. There is one that's strikingly different from the rest though, and that's Zophy because he never had a rise until Ultraman Mebius. No, we're talking about a certain Ultra 7. Love it. 7 was originally supposed to be an entirely separate entity from the original show, which is why the presentation of his transformation was different, until they retconned him into the same universe of course. But his style of transformation is still iconic, and it's awesome to see his body change step by step into Ultra 7. This kind of transformation wasn't going to be replicated nearly as much as the original Ultramans though, although it did show up in some of the future sequences like Ultraman Max or Ultraman Zeros. Ultraman AT also deserves some recognition here as he has two kinds of rises, a more traditional one and an experimental one showing a real-time size growth and dynamic movement, and this is something that we'll see more in the following era. Yes, in the next major era of the franchise, rises are here to stay. In fact, they haven't changed much in terms of concept, besides having more advanced abstract backgrounds and effects. Except there is. The early Heisei era was somewhat known for being the time when they were being experimental with a lot of pretty jank CGI, and you can definitely see some of its influence in the rises. Ultraman Zearth started this with his CGI rise, which looked kinda goofy but was fitting for the type of movie that he was in, a comedy, and it's kind of normal for movies to have special rises. Ultraman Tiga's first stretch of episodes had this CGI animated rise which was always changing, and eventually they settled for a normal one, but even for that normal one they would always kind of change the style. Sometimes it's spinning, sometimes it's not. But if we're talking CGI rises, Ultraman Dyna had a prominent one, which was kind of like Ultraman 80s in that it was a dynamic rise, showing from top to bottom, and showing Ultraman Dyna's full movements while rising. And yes, the CGI does look funky, but I think it's pretty great. I like that they made him look crystalline and eventually gain color towards the end. It gives it that materializing feeling. At least I hope that's what they were going for. While not technically a rise, but more of an after rise, Ultraman Cosmos had a pretty cool CGI shot of him materializing. The CGI eventually got really good though, like with Ultraman Max, who had a rise that paid homage to Ultra 7 with a step-by-step transformation, and successively a rise with a dynamic camera angle. Also, he's the first one to rise without any hands outstretched. What a Chad. This era also featured a new thing, which is alternate rises for different forms, starting with Ultraman Gaia and Agul, who got new rises when they gained their V2 forms, and Ultraman Gaia even got one for Supreme version, although I prefer Ultraman Gaia's V1 rise because V2's got this jank shift when his face gets close to the camera. And that brings us to the following major era of the franchise, the new generation. Kicking off the new generation was Ultraman Ginga with a goofy ass rise. He's spinning with his arms crossed in 3 stages. Now I'm all for doing new things, so I didn't really mind this to be honest. Although they did update Ultraman Ginga's rise to a more traditional one in Ultraman Ginga S. Rises in this era progressed naturally from the early Heisei rises in that the abstract backgrounds stayed similar technologically but started to have more dynamic poses like Ultraman X's crossed arms, Ultraman Orb's O pose, and etc. Almost every form change has its own rise too. Ultraman Group though, he started a trend of some not so good looking CGI again, which Ultraman Taiga did improve on, but I think it still left something to be desired. And fortunately, the Ultraman CGI rises have improved a lot in Z, Trigger, and Decker. That was a lot of rises. I don't think I can look at the word rise the same way again. Now, like I mentioned before, rises include a lot of the Ultraman's identity. Just from the little details you can discern some stuff about them, and I will point out some examples that I really like. Ultraman Hikari's rise has the Orb crystals from his beloved planet Orb. Ultraman Mebius has an open hand pose as his teacher was Ultraman Taro, and the same with Ultraman Taiga, who is Ultraman Taro's son. The various aesthetics of the fusion components in the fusion forms, like Ultraman Belial's eyes and Ultraman's red background in Jeet Primitive for instance, as well as Ultra 7's spinning spark thing in Ultraman Z's Alpha Edge background. There's a lot to appreciate in this kind of stuff, and I guess a lot of you have noticed it as well. At the end of the day, the rise is a staple in the Ultra series, an unchanging constant that helps give viewers that sense of familiarity. In my opinion, the rise unites the many Ultraman we've had throughout the years through such a simple and recognizable sequence. It's something that fans can look at and look forward to with every new series, and even old fans who may have fell off a bit can look at and go, "Whoa, they've still got it?" But not me though. I got mad that they didn't bring back rises, but turns out I just mistook rises for rice.